This is the Analysis in Chains with Nathan Williams and Neil Kieran.
Welcome to Analysis in Chains. I'm sitting here in Santa Clara with with Eric Weaver and Kevin Manship, both from Blockhead Technologies. Eric is one of the advisors, and Kevin is the man representing the plan at Blockhead. And we've just been on a panel talking about using blockchain for responsible sourcing and supply chain traceability. Guys, thank you for agreeing to be interviewed for the show.
Yeah, great to be here.
Thank you.
So we had a pretty in-depth conversation. What was your sense of the audience when we were talking to them? Do you think that they really understood what we were talking about with blockchain and how it would be applicable to the supply chain?
It's a great question. I think that the fact that they were drawn to that room, they were interested in understanding more about blockchain technology and how tech in general could help solve some of the big, hairy, audacious goals in the minerals area, especially around proof of origin, proof of provenance, etc. So, whether they understood everything we were talking about, I don't know. It's a great question.
I was really excited. I sat front row for the panel and didn't see everyone walk in, and I turned around and I was really surprised and pleasantly surprised at how many people were in that room wanting to hear about
like
technology.
Yeah,
easily.
I mean, from my point of view, I asked the question at the beginning, right? Like, how many people have heard of blockchain? How many people consider themselves experts? I got a laugh.
A couple of hands up.
A couple of hands. Like, I think that when we're talking about blockchain for this industry, we're really looking at newcomers to the field, and there's an education process.
Absolutely.
But I mean, have you guys found that, like, with Blockhead? Or when you?
Yeah, it's depending on the industry that you're looking at going into, and we're heavily focused on the mining area, and they typically have their technology divisions, and they hear about blockchain, but they're also scared of it as well. So, and obviously applying that to their supply chain, they're interested in seeing what it can do. They've heard about it, and they always want to know more information. So it's a matter of guiding them through that process about the benefits that it can bring to their business.
And what we've seen also, if the primary decision makers for the larger enterprises are corporate types, many of them are fully booked, fully maxed out. Yep. They're curious, but if they're at this convention, they want to learn more. But really, it's about helping them communicate the value prop back to their management, who's got the signatory ability on the budget to do something like this.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about the leave behind. You get the right tech people in the room, but it's the guys up top that are typically afraid of it all and afraid to commit to something that's so new and for them foreign.
And what I'd add to that, sorry to interrupt,
no worries.
We found, I'm former PwC, and we found that if you really want people to pull the trigger on something like this, a disruptive technology, a new technology, something that's not been tested widely, that you tie it strategically to their bonus. Like their KPIs, like if their KPIs are I got to increase production by 30%, I got to drop my cost by 10%, etc., then you find a way to take those strategic pillars and tie them to blockchain tactics or supply chain tactics or whatever. And when you make those connections for them, the light bulb comes on their head. I can get my bonus if I do this thing. I'm going to pull the trigger.
It does make sense if you think about it, that because blockchain is all about incentive models and game theory. So I suppose this shouldn't come as a surprise for too many of us. I mean, why don't we take a step back? Why don't you guys introduce Blockhead Technologies? What's your approach? Because we're in a very similar space, blockchain for traceability, mining. So what do you guys do that's specifically Blockhead?
Great introduction. We're about product stewardship at the end of the day. So we want to provide a company with end-to-end visibility of their supply chain and having that data feed in that helps maintain the tamper-proof ledger, which is how we sell it, rather than blockchain these days, to provide a certain level of security about events being recorded at points in time. And that's a real benefit, certainly from an audit and compliance point of view. Your PwCs, your EYs, they're all in that sort of space where audit and compliance cost a lot of money. It's time consuming so that you've got the positive angle there. You've also got from an actual supplier and manufacturer point of view, they like to see exactly where things have come from. So we actually provide that end-to-end visibility of that supply chain, which works really well.
So tell me a little bit about the technology behind, because when you're, from what I understand, you guys are doing more private solutions or customized solutions for people?
Yeah, at the moment we are. We're actually blockchain agnostic, so we've actually developed it allowing the customer to actually either host it in their own cloud instance or we can host it for them. From a blockchain agnostic point of view, we're both Ethereum and Hyperledger as well, so it allows the customer, if they have a certain choice, a lot of your big corporations, sensitive data, they don't want that going out, or they have certain partnerships, maybe with an IBM, or they're more brave to go with an Ethereum or even a Neo network that running in their cloud instance. So we like to offer that flexibility. It is such an early adopter sort of approach, but these big companies and corporate companies, particularly in mining, have their IT policies and they're very strict about what data they put out there. So yeah, it's more about in that private space.
Do you think that they care that much about which technology gets implemented, or like is this something that's even on their radar, or is it just so new that you tell them yes we're using Ethereum, or yes we're using Hyperledger, and they're like, okay, whatever you say, boss?
I think some of it does go over their head. The bigger companies can see this coming, so that they're already starting to put that in their IT strategy and IT processes about what it is they need. Look at the benefits, the pros, cons, the weaknesses. Certainly security is a big factor for these companies. So they're taking notice and they're being prepared. They don't want the IT guys jumping the gun and saying, oh, we've got this Ethereum instance running in our cloud now, and they don't have a policy in place. So the policies and procedures are coming first, and then they'll adopt it.
I think there's a little bit of a no one got fired for hiring IBM thing going on too. So if you're not a blockchain expert in what types of chains or what the advantages, disadvantages of each one are, then IBM's a safe bet. Everyone knows the brand, and so I think that's partly, perhaps, maybe this is controversial, why Hyperledger has seen such an adoption among enterprise clients at least.
It's that, totally agree, it's that safety blanket of a support contract. Companies pay a fortune for that. They like having that, I can ring them up, shout at someone down the phone if something's not working properly. The other technologies don't necessarily have that. They sleep well at night, the operations guys, with an IBM in their back pocket sort of thing to phone up if it goes wrong.
Yep.
So, let's see, how do I put this delicately? If it has been said by people that private permission blockchains are slow, expensive databases, how would you react to that sort of assertion?
The push and pull between I have a supply chain and I don't want anyone to know my data. I don't want them to know my pricing. I don't want them to know my contracts, and I'm not going to play unless this is all private. So you've got those of us who are trying to introduce disruptive technologies, saying, blockchain, woo, you got to be on this system, etc. And they're like, I'm not making everything transparent. Why would I do that? And why would I give my competitors a window into what we're doing? So the optimal thing to me is a public-private hybrid where the contracts, the smart contracts, the PII for some of these farms or mines or any
PII?
of those, the personal identifiable information. Like if you're a supplier, you may not want to know your exact GPS coordinates for where your mine is, right? So right there, you don't want that stuff to be on a public chain, but the product origins and the provenance and the logistics and the conditions of transport can be private or public rather, because then when everyone knows that, it's not going to give up competitive advantage. So those of us who are trying to introduce change are running into this wall of I'm not giving up my data, and the only way I'm playing is if this is private with the benefits of a public chain. It's a war, for hearts and minds.
One of the topics that's discussed here is the RMI guidelines for storing that information on the chain, and you've been involved. I know Blockhead's involved in those guidelines and contributing to that. And I think storing that information in a standard way is a way we can get forward with this. Yourself, you mentioned if everyone's running their own private chain or own public chain and no one's talking to each other, then there's zero benefit there.
Yeah.
What's the point? Yeah, exactly. So by having these standards that people and guidelines that individual companies can adhere to, certainly from a public space, and know that it can link back to a private record in their own environment, that gives that confidence there, that level of transparency that I can trust this record and this data. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on cryptocurrencies? The thing is, there's been mixed reviews all around. A lot of people I know are sort of nervous about the idea of cryptocurrencies. There's other people like me where I've, been sort of cautiously optimistic. What's your thoughts? And what are your thoughts on, say, large industry and with their readiness to use a tokenized system?
I'll say something super controversial. So in the States, all the latest reports show that trust has cratered among consumers. No one trusts anyone with anything. My 5'0" Japanese mother says stuff to me like, "Oh, those doctors, what do they know?" I'm like, "Oh, well, more than you and more than me. Come on, like that. We don't trust the cops. If they pull us over, they're going to shoot us when we go for a wall. They don't trust doctors. Are they going to sew us up with a scalpel inside? And so these pillars of trust that have been there for society for so long are really shaking now. So crypto comes along, it has all this great promise. Everyone wants to get rich quick. And then they see the bubble kind of burst a little bit and the balloon fall off the rose. And they're like, one more thing that didn't work, and it's one more proof point that I'm right being distrustful of everyone, It's just like, well, just hold on a minute, It's not a panacea. It's not going to be a perfect thing for everyone. Give it a chance. And so the get rich quick crypto party kids, I call them, I think they're seeing, how can I sell a mining rig, That's my thing. I'm selling mining rigs. So it's like, okay, you're contributing to the pollution of the planet. Well done. And by the way, you're not making the returns you used to. Like if the focus...
We want to sell the shovels in a gold rush.
Yeah. Exactly. And if we conflate the two, blockchain loses value and it loses trust. And that's the thing I worry about more than anything is like, I believe 100% this technology. I burned the damn ships. There's no going back. Yep. This is the future. But I worry that in this whirlwind of fake facts, alternate facts, fake news, and distrustful people who have, in the States especially, where it's cratered, where no one believes anyone anymore, I worry that this is a great solution, and people, if they don't trust in it, we won't get the participation we need.
I think there's a lot of positives there with cryptocurrency. I'm an advocate for it. I think it can actually solve a lot of problems. It's had a bad rap lately. It perhaps got too high. The balloon got too big last year. Everyone jumped on it, like you said. Everyone was trying to get rich quick. Didn't fully understand why it existed and what it was actually capable of. And I think that's going to take time to rebuild that public confidence again, which is a shame because But I think at the moment that whole take stock approach is needed. Hopefully it ends soon. Because there is a lot of positive news coming out. You look at the sites and the blogs. Big companies are doing things in this space and they're adopting it. I think having it as a way to pay for goods and services online a little bit more will be a gateway to adoption. I think that's probably what's going to be needed to start seeing that more of the general public uptake to say, well, hey, I've got a crypto wallet and I've got my credit card here. I'll pay with my crypto wallet instead. So I think the adoption, that's a step towards building that trust again, such as your Amazons and your big retailers actually bringing that on board.
Do you guys remember, like 2007, there were 3 micro messaging platforms. There was Twitter, Pounce, and JQ.
I do not
remember those?
Nope.
Okay, so they were all equal. They had equal adoption.
Google didn't have Google.
That was a little bit later.
Oh, okay.
But they had equal adoption for this sort of Twitter-like kind of experience, and they were all kind of fighting each other and trash talking each other and all that stuff. And then what happened? One by one, 2 of them fell by the wayside, and one took off like a rocket, and it became this complete, transforming the way we interact with information and each other. And I think that we're in the Twitter, JQ, Pounce era now of crypto, where the ones with the most traction, of course, Bitcoin has the longest history and the biggest uptake, but those will continue to rise to the top, and the ones that are experimental, not fully funded, not fully bought into, or can't communicate well will kind of drop off.
I think you're right, and honestly, I think that what we're going to see is something that we've seen in the internet industry, which is usability and UX being the key deciding factor.
Absolutely.
Because crypto is so new and it's so complex that in order to build something proper, you have to attract really, really smart engineers. And really, really smart engineers aren't always focused on usability. And, you know, if you've got to buy one token in order to buy another token on another exchange in order to get rewarded, and the third token that finally allows you to use the system, will grandma ever use it?
We're creatures of story. It's not just about the usability and the experience, but it's also about why Minespider, why Neo, you know, why Blockhead. We have to be able to tell that story in a way that people can relate to, where they get to, because they're, in their mind, they're forming a relationship with you also, whether they want to trust you to invest in your coin or whatever, or in your business. And so I think that's the other thing, where the folks with really good stories are the ones that are bubbling to the top. The ones that are just like, here's a tech hammer, and don't you see all the cool nails to pound in? Yeah. Those are the folks that are going to just sort of fizzle out and burn through a lot of cash.
It's funny, Eric, because you know, I do see that tendency of wanting to make something sort of correct and functional and workable. But in the end of the day, the average person doesn't really want to scan a barcode and see the 50 happy people other than just once. They want to see an identifier that tells them someone else has scanned the barcode, yes, someone else has done the due diligence, and this thing works and it's responsibly sourced, so that they can move on with their lives. Mm-hmm. And
fair point.
You know, it's the challenge that, on the one hand, we don't trust anybody anymore and we want to have a trustless system. But on the other hand, we sort of do want to trust people so that we don't have to become experts in every single domain area.
It's like, I don't want to be the guy that changes the street light bulbs outside my house. I trust that someone else is going to do that and do their damn job. And it's the same thing, you know, to your point, that's where I think the credibility scoring comes really interesting, or some kind of validation score where we're an independent auditor, like a PwC or a Deloitte or whatever, has gone to this place, investigated the mine, investigated the conditions, and come up with an independent score that can't be gamed. If we can get to that, then I think that I as the buyer might go, oh, someone, you know, the company I trust has done their due diligence, and they themselves have a good score. They're not going to get bought off by some corrupt government official. Therefore, I don't have to do that. But if I wanted to click through and see the details, I could. But in the interest of time, because I can't replace a light bulb outside my house or whatever, I don't want to have to do all that. I want to turn it over to someone that I trust. So
I think companies have to want to change as well, and provide that, you know, that responsible source of materials. So while there's technology and you can use technology to help that, there's still that human factor to it, to actually to use the mobile app to scan that QR code, or to take some photographic evidence of the product that's being produced and say, well, this is what it is at this point in time, and upload that into a system that cannot be tampered with. You go, well, I have a record of that. But again, it's still open to gaming in some areas. How much?
Yeah, but you got to solve the problem you have today, not the problem you might have tomorrow.
And isn't it a bajillion times better to have the system than not? You know, even though it's not perfect, even though there's flaws, even though there's potential for people to abuse the system, it's 1,000 times better than not having the damn system. So to me, it's just like when I get that question, like, well, people can still game the system. People can still do stuff. It's like, well, of course they can, but we've removed a whole bunch of failure points, and we've improved the quality of the data, 100%. So,
at the end of the day, that photographic evidence at that point in time, if something does change after that, you have a record to go back onto to see who actually did that. So you can actually narrow, like you said, narrow that window of time down to say, well, something went wrong between this point and this point, rather than 20 points in between when something could have changed.
And something to the effect of 90% of corruption is just changing data anyway. And so even just the fact that you can't change it means that if someone signs off on it, they're going to have to, really put their name behind it, right?
Amen, brother.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, Eric, Kevin, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And best of luck with Blockhead, and I guess we'll continue chatting in the future.